Steve Mayeda from the TSL podcast, and today we have Bill Murphy. He's a serial entrepreneur. He runs the site ForeverJobLess.com, which is a resource basically if you're interested in making more money, being an entrepreneur, being a successful blogger, any way that you can have that sort of independence. Forever Jobless believes that you should have the resources in order to develop and build that for yourself. He's a passionate guy. In fact, before the age of 30, he was able to start and successfully start multiple million-dollar companies. I don't know too many people who've done that, and my money's always on him. In fact, he makes a few predictions of what's going to be to come in 2014 for Bill Murphy and Forever Jobless, among some other ventures. So, if you want to see how it turns out, definitely check it out. In any case, TSL really believes that you should have the opportunity to live as the best possible expression of man you can be, and this is one of those resources. Another one of those resources is the Better Man's Guide to Dating and Lifestyle. It's exactly what it says it is. If you want to be the best man who has the best relationships with people, man, you just got to learn to be the better expression of yourself. This is exactly what the Better Man's Guide to Dating and Lifestyle will teach you how to do. Check it out. It's $37. It is a whole lot of information, very easy to learn, and built by TSL alumni. So, without further ado, check out Bill Murphy, check out Forever Jobless, and don't forget to go to thesexuallife.com and sign up on our newsletter. We'll see you on the other side. What's happening, guys? Steve Mayeda here at TSL Podcast, and today we have Bill Murphy. Billy Murphy. I remember one time I sent an email out and it said Bill Murphy, and you're like, everybody knows me by Billy. But man, you've done so many things. You got Forever Jobless, you have Ecom Labs, and you got something new coming up. What's going on?
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I guess the new stuff that I have coming out, I'm launching a podcast on April 1st. I'm forcing myself to launch on April 1st. That's why I'm doing a few interviews, and then if I tell everybody I have a podcast coming out and I don't have it when the time comes, it's going to seem pretty stupid when interviews come out talking about the podcast. So I forced myself to get it out there. And then I'm doing, you and I touched briefly on it, but doing the investing and advising in different online ventures. Yeah.
So check this out. I mean, I met you a long time ago and you were really into business. We actually met in an internet marketing thing, which both of us are not like, it's rare for me to be at an internet marketing thing. And I think it's not rare for you to be involved in anything with, good business stuff, but not necessarily in that field of things. But Since then, man, I have seen you consistently and efficiently grow business. And I think you were like 24, 25 at that time, to grow businesses and do that's the crazy thing. The 3 days before Forever Jobless launched, we did a podcast and you told me what would happen. Now, you didn't tell me and you didn't know that you were only going to do like 9 or 10 blog posts that year and have it be a successful blog. But you told me exactly how it was going to be a successful blog. And you made it that. And you show the stats. That's what's crazy. And then the day before, or again, like 3 or 4 days before Ecom Labs went live, you did that. And now you're about to do a podcast. All are successful. All do exactly what you say they're going to do. And it's unbelievably consistent. So that all being said, man, first off, well, actually second off, we'll answer this later, the secrets to your success. But what's going to happen with this podcast? I want to know. April 1st, 2014, what's going to be happening?
So I still haven't decided if I'm doing the daily or not. I've been debating doing a daily podcast.
Right.
And so thinking about doing a daily, if I think I can keep up with that amount of work, I'll do it. And the reason I'm thinking about doing a daily, there's some guys who started putting out higher and higher volume content for podcasts. And what happens is, so the way the rankings are in iTunes, it's basically based on, downloads is a very heavy part of their algorithm. So downloads, ratings, maybe subscribers, I'm not sure, but downloads is like the heaviest part of it. So if you do one podcast a week and you get however many downloads, and somebody else does one podcast a day and gets the same exact amount of downloads per show, they're going to obliterate the person who has the same quality show only because the rankings don't track per individual show, they track for total. And so some people have essentially been not that they're gaming it, but essentially like you can game it by the amount of downloads. And so it still has to be high quality. Obviously, I can't just, throw up random stuff and or else it'll tank, bad ratings and people won't download it anymore. So you have to put out quality content. But there's basically this gap. And from what I understand, some of the people in this gap may not be there anymore, but a couple people that I know put out podcasts like a year and a half ago when there just wasn't enough content. And so they put out daily shows so that people needed more content to listen to. Nowadays, it's a little different to where I'm going into it where it's crowded. Like the same type of situation as blogging was. Like blogging is like one of the most crowded industries ever. And I think I talked to you about this before, though. It wasn't saturated. Yeah. Like there's a big difference. Like there's crowded and there's saturated. And I kind of see the same thing in podcasts, although I'll be honest, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. But the ones I have listened to, I see the same gap. I think there's definitely room for like a high quality entrepreneur podcast I mean, there's high quality ones out there, but it's like there's not, if you loved listening to podcasts and there's a couple high quality podcasts out there for entrepreneurs, you're open to checking out something new. I mean, there's, in the make money blogging, there's 1,000 of those blogs out there, but when I looked at it, I was like, there's not much competition in that market. So podcasting, it's going to be difficult to get the initial jump, but if I can, I think there's a potential to build a huge audience a lot quicker than a blog. The reason being, when you put out a blog post, so I'll get a good traffic spike for like a day or two, and then it pretty much drops down to where I'm getting, 200 hits a day or whatever. And that's not very much traffic. And granted, I haven't put out a lot of posts. That's part of the reason. But at the same time, if I had put out a podcast and, had the same amount of interest as my blog has gotten per post, I would have a ton of downloads. And the reason being that it's in iTunes' best interest to promote their good content. And then they drive that to the top. And if driven to the top, then you get even more downloads. It's kind of like the same theory as, if you get on the bestsellers week, it almost acts as a marketing tool, right? So, same thing for me. If I get in, top 10 business podcasts, which that's going to be very difficult. Not sure I can do that or not. But if I get in, the top of new and noteworthy, which is like, the kind of the top rated new shows. Right. If I can become one of the top rated new shows, then it acts as its own marketing tool for me. And iTunes is basically freely promoting me. So where blogs, like, this is irrelevant, but it explains the point, is that I'm on a WordPress site, right? But WordPress doesn't have there's no incentive for WordPress to be like, check out this new blog. It's amazing. Where iTunes is different, because iTunes they want listeners to have high quality content. They want them to stay in iTunes. So where it's, blogging, if I put out a blog post and it's amazing, the only way that blog post is getting shared is if I get people to share it, or if you read it and you're like, hey, I like this, and you share it. But there's no company behind it saying like, wow, we got to get our listeners to hear this guy.
But now you did that, right, with your blog. I mean, that's what's crazy, is it was the same idea of supply and demand. There's not a person out there. You saw a hole in the market, and you basically created a blog where you said, and you told me, man, and this is probably something that we should talk about, you were like, man, there was competition. There's been competition, heavy competition in every business I've started, but if you're the best, there isn't any competition. Right. And that's been a motto that I've really internalized myself. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, so it's that all those markets were very crowded. Mm-hmm. So they were crowded, but they weren't necessarily competitive. Yeah. So the difference being that, like, like blog, I mean, we can talk for a minute, and this is maybe kind of boring to people, but like the gap in the market for blogs, there was two of them. One was like, lower quality content being produced than people wanted to read, and kind of integrated into that was the fact that everybody was putting out like, 500 to 700 word posts, and you really can't crush a topic in 500 to 700 words. You can give a tip or something, but there wasn't really many people at all putting out content. That most of my stuff is like, 3,000 words, 4,000 words, sometimes longer, that I can take a concept or an idea and talk about the idea, talk about any potential rebuttal to the idea, and basically like cover the idea in full, to where there's no one doing that. And it sounds like a weird thing to talk about because it's not a business, right? Like I'm not monetizing each blog post. I don't even try to monetize it yet, but it's the same concept in business. There just wasn't anybody doing that. So it's this huge gap. And even now still, like even after I launched and, the blog's been up for probably like a year and a half or something. And there's still, if somebody wanted to get into blogging and they're like, I don't understand how to become successful in blogging, just look at the content everybody puts out. And then, look at people who, if they put a post out and it's successful, just study what they're doing. And like for mine, it's just happens to be covering things really, really, really in depth on topics that people need to know and are potentially like newer ways to think about ideas, where everybody else was taking the same exact ideas and saying the same thing, so there's no reason to share it.
Man, this is funny because I did an interview with Anthony Johnson yesterday, and he's the founder of the 21 Convention. Now, he did, and he actually was telling me, he's like, man, you should do this with YouTube. Different than iTunes, but YouTube has its interest to push your stuff if it's popular. And he's like, man, I became a superpower on YouTube. And he did, the coolest thing about this podcast is hearing this guy's vision. And I've been very involved in the 21 Convention, all that sort of stuff, but it is unreal. And he's 24 now, right? Yeah. He started this thing when he was 17. And he basically is saying, I flooded YouTube with good content. He has a 50,000 person subscriber rate, which he thinks is low, but their average estimated time is 15 minutes for each video. So it's just crazy. So advertisement space on his channel is huge. Like he does so well with that, and his following is so huge. And he's like, man, all I did, and it's exactly what you did. And this is what I've always liked Anthony, and we're very similar in this way, is it's like, man, build your business how you want it. Do what's important, have quality and content be the main thing. And that's what I always hear you saying, but then you have this separate genius to you where you can figure out how to make it work in a system. And this is something that you don't see with with tons of people, man. You do not see that. You do not see that you're like 30, right?
31.
You're 31. Okay, getting older. But I mean, you just no, man. It's crazy. Like the things that you do, you found the pattern to success very quickly. And a lot of times, people will find massive failure or massive struggle getting to a point of success, and it's really difficult. You found that early on, and what were some of those struggles that just hit you in the face? To where it was like, shit, man, was there ever a moment where you just lost everything when you were down and out with it, even when you were playing poker?
I never lost everything. I think, you mentioned I kind of figured out things quickly, but, I was constantly hustling since like a teenager trying to learn stuff. And I was always reading and trying different business ideas and trying to think of new ideas. I remember a point, I think I was probably in college, and I was constantly trying to think of a big business idea, and I didn't know how to think of it. I'd never learned from anyone who's an entrepreneur at that point. And so I would come up with ideas that I'd look back at now and be like, that was a stupid idea. Why would I ever think of that? But at the time, I didn't know kind of the fundamentals of exactly what should I be thinking about around how to start a business. And so there were plenty of times where I would think of a business idea, I would look into it, and I would not know where to go with it. I mean, I remember one time, this was like a big letdown for me. So I was in between sophomore year and junior year at college, I think, or freshman and sophomore, or sophomore and junior. I was like 20, and I was interning for the 76ers, the basketball team. And I remember poker was like just starting to take off at the time. And I remember I had an idea of doing bobbleheads for poker players. Now at the time, thinking about it now, it probably seems stupid, but it was actually like a really.
Who would have been a bobblehead? Would it have been like the online guys, or would it have been like Doyle Brunson guys?
Doyle Brunson, Phil Ivey, Phil Hellmuth, like guys like that. And I was like, man, there's a big market for this, and there actually it was gonna be a decent market. So at the time, bobbleheads were actually in, because this is like 10 years ago or 12 years ago.
Yeah. And it was big. I mean, I remember, so I didn't get into I've never been in the poker scene, but I just remember like bookstores, like maybe more than 10 years ago, just started being packed with like the David Skalansky theory of poker and, you know, that sort of stuff. It was just nuts. Like there was this big boom of it.
Yeah. And I was around all the memorabilia every day in the office with the 76ers. There were Allen Iverson bobbleheads everywhere. And so I was like, you know what? Like no one's doing this yet in poker. And so I was 20. How do you do a deal like that? And somehow I made this deal happen, right? So I was working for the Sixers in the day, and I would go home and play poker to make money because it was an unpaid internship.
Right.
And so I would play poker for a few hours at night, and then I was hustling to try and figure out a way to do this deal. And I didn't know how to do the deal, so I was posting on the internet like, how do I make a deal happen? And I was having people sign NDAs, which is like the stupidest thing ever. I didn't know at the time. That's how you think you're supposed to do business, is have people sign NDAs and all this stuff. And so finally, I started mentioning to the guys in the office, this is what I'm doing. And so I called Daniel Negreanu. I got his number somehow on the internet. Like it must have been an old message board or something. Like I was just one of those kids who would just Google everything until I could find it. And I found his number. And I called it. And I was like, hey, is this Daniel? And he's like, yes. And probably there wasn't anybody else calling him at that time. This was just when poker was starting to, be popular and all that. And I'm sure like it was difficult to find his number. It wasn't easy.
Yeah.
And I told him like, hey, I have this idea that I want to do. Do you have a minute to talk about it? And he said, well, give me an idea of what it is, and I can put you in touch with, my management if it's a good idea or whatever. And I told him what the idea was, and he's like, yeah, I'm not, I don't know, I can't remember the conversation, but, it ended with that he wasn't doing anything in that space at the time, and he gave me his agent's number. And so I get off the phone, I call his agent, and agent's like, yeah, tell me what you're looking to do and all this stuff. And I'd never done anything like this. So, beforehand, the only business I had done was, buying and selling, baseball cards and stuff. But I had never done like a real like business. And so, so I don't know how this is going to go. And so I talk to the agent, and he says I need to get him like prototypes and like cost and like, what are we going to pay per bobblehead? And I'm like, I didn't thought of any of this stuff. Like, I was just trying to hustle, work a deal. And so I was like, okay, so I had to figure out like how the heck do you make a bobblehead? Like, I don't know. So I started like, and this is the time when it wasn't easy to just kind of Google something and you get the best results for, for bobbleheads. Like I had to actually like try and figure out where do I go to find these people. And so, long story short, I got like two of them, ended up talking to one of them in depth that I liked. They gave me all the costs, figured out the cost, sent over like all the spreadsheets. I told them which pro. This guy happened to represent like all the major pros. Like I kind of got lucky in that I could make a deal for most people under one guy. And so agreed to a price. Like I would give them whatever it was, a couple dollars per bobblehead that sold. I had like 8 different players, signed a deal with them. And then, it was obviously contingent on me getting money. And he said, how are you going to raise the money to produce these and all that? And keep in mind, I'm in college. I was making a little bit of money with poker, but I'd not made real money yet. I was like, 20 at the time. And so I was like, shoot, I got to figure out a way to make money on this. And so, I don't know where I looked exactly. I might have called my dad, like asked him, like, hey, can I get a loan? Can I, want a partner or whatever it was? And, my dad wasn't a risk taker like that. And I probably called some other people, and most of the people I knew at that time didn't have money either. All my friends were college kids. So, ended up talking to the guys in the office with the Sixers, and 3 of the guys were like, yeah, you know what? Like, we'll put money in to do this.
Wow.
And it was going to take like 30 grand, right? And so I was like, okay, so each guy was going to put 10 grand in, and these were like, full-time salaried employees. So like 10 grand, they could work 10 grand.
Right.
And so we worked out a deal, all ready to go. And then one of the guys says, I'm not comfortable putting 10 grand in. Like it's too big of a risk for me, too much of a risk. And so one guy dropped out. Then the other guys panicked because keep in mind, none of these guys are like investors or risk takers. They're just like three guys who saw it was like a pretty good idea. To take a chance. So one guy drops out, and the other guy's like, oh shoot, like if he's out, like maybe he knows something, like maybe it's not gonna work. And so the other guys dropped out, and I was like, oh shoot, or like one guy dropped out, second guy dropped out, and then I went like the guy I was working for directly, my boss at the time. I talked to him one day and was like debating what to do because like he wasn't just gonna drop $30,000 on a business idea that some intern had. And so I talked to him, and he's like, yeah, yeah, I should probably drop out or whatever. And so then I was like, shit, like, what the hell do I do? And so I had this deal, which was like, man, like, I feel like, and it's not like the bobblehead business would have been this huge company, but I think I would have been pretty successful with that business and probably could have scaled it into other businesses because I would have been like literally the only memorabilia guy at the time. Like this is when like poker had just taken off like that summer or something. And so I was like, shit, like I was going to use that as a way to like, have like, 50 different endorsement deals with the guys. I mean, I didn't know, that was just the first idea. So when they dropped out, then I was like, shit. So I was like, kind of, ended up going back to school, and I was like, how the heck do I raise this money? And I'm sure I was like emailing random people asking, how do you get monies? How do you get money partners for these deals? And long story short, the agent, I remember like being in one of the computer labs at school, and the agent sent me this email, or got this email from the agent saying like, yeah, we're just gonna give this deal to another company. And at the time I was like, what? That's like my, that's my like idea. That's all this stuff.
Right. Yeah. I
mean, your idea doesn't mean anything if you can't execute it. So at the time I was like pissed, I was like, man, like I would have figured out a way, but I was taking a long time. I was a kid in college, like, at night shooting people emails asking them how to raise money for this thing. So yeah, basically he gave it to some other company. And yeah, I think I wrote him an email back at the time. I was like, dude, like, give me some more time. Like, this is not cool. Like all this, like, this was like a huge opportunity to me at the time. This is like my biggest thing I tried to do. And so I was pissed, but, I got over it. And, you look back and it's like, well, that deal probably would have been a relatively tiny deal compared to, the stuff I want to do, but I never know what could have happened with it. Like that was going to
but it would have also been your first big thing. Like now, you deal with business on a different level that I deal with it, but the only difference is the mentality and the belief and the, seeing the possibility of it. And so your vision, I think, is different than other people's out there, and that's what makes you so successful with it. Man, I'm going to jump back because I was saying something, but you said something that reminded me of what Anthony was talking about, is that most people in the blogging industry are just putting out information. And he was like, man, it's almost disturbing. Actually, he did say, I think this may have been after the podcast, but we got like all into it. We're pretty good friends and help each other out with our stuff. But he was like, man, it's disturbing. Information marketing is exactly that. It's marketing information. And these people end up becoming really good writers, but they're not thinkers and they don't create anything new. And, it really made a lot of sense. And that actually made a lot of sense to how you do things, because what you do is unique, man. I've seen you do it. I've seen you do it with multiple businesses. Now you're going to do it with this podcast, and we'll see what happens. But I'd put my money on you just because it's never, you did a podcast with me the day Forever Jobless, or, a couple days before it started, and exactly those things happened. And then the same thing with Ecom Labs, and now with the podcast stuff. So it's like where it kind of disheartens me to know that you didn't have any like major trials and tribulations, but I guess it does suck to have the stuff pulled out from under you. But one of the things I was talking about with Anthony is like on one of the conventions that he threw, he lost all his money and had to sell his car. And, it was like the convention was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and he sold his car later that week to pay for the, facilities that he had gone in debt with and all that sort of stuff, and found success with it. And there's a whole bunch of stories like that, even with myself. But how did you learn to cultivate and get this vision, the vision that, gives you the author of so many great slogans, like if you're going to be the best, there's no competition, or, follow one person and stop listening to everybody else. It's just, there's so many little gems that you have. what was your path to learn that skill to, man, take whatever it was, $100, $1,000, $10,000, and double it, turn it into something which became an engine of business and success?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, a lot of time, like I was spinning my wheels like everybody else. Like it wasn't like I just knew this stuff. Man, I hustled. Like I would stay in. I think you and I have talked about this before. I would stay in on weekends when I was, in college or out of college or whatever, and read, like, if I found somebody I thought was knowledgeable on a subject, I would literally read like every post they'd ever written on the forum. And it was like thousands of posts. Like I would just basically essentially put a book together of their stuff and read it all. And so, I was doing that not knowing much about business. And so I would slowly learn, and I would take what I learned, and I'd take something that didn't make sense to me at the time, and I would ask them. And then what I learned a lot of times was some people will give you advice and they don't know what they're talking about, but everyone like wants to give you advice. And so I would slowly learn, like, wait a minute, like if I logically like can't understand something, and I asked them to explain it, lots of times I would learn why. Sometimes I would learn that maybe that person doesn't really know what they're talking, like, because a lot of people sound really good, but if they can't back it up with either success and or logic as to why something works, then you shouldn't be following them. But what I would do is I would do that for a lot of people. So maybe I did that for 8 people, and maybe 2 or 3 of them I was like, like that's probably not a guy. He sounds really good, like posting all this stuff, but there's really not a lot of substance behind what he's saying. He says a lot of cool things that sound good, but then the other guys are like, man, I learned a ton from those guys, and I would go to them and I would get answers from them because they could see I did all the work. So basically I would go to them and say, hey man, like 6 months ago you made this post and you said this, and like, why did you say that? Why is it this way instead of this? And so they could see, like, I wasn't wasting their time. I was hustling and like trying to figure stuff out. So it wasn't that I knew this stuff early on. And what I learned was, you can, for the stuff that most people are doing, like most of us are not Steve Jobs and Elon Musk. Like I'm not doing anything like that. So for the stuff that you and I are doing or anybody else is doing usually is somebody has already done it. Like somebody's already accomplished it. Yeah. So it sounds stupidly simple, but it is, in that all we have to do is figure out exactly what led to that success and then do that. And it sounds easy. It's like, oh, it can't be that easy, but it really is.
Right.
And it's, and a lot of people get that confused though with, like, they'll say, okay, so they'll try to integrate like 4-hour work week principles with that. And that's where everybody gets screwed. So it's basically, a lot of people are like, okay, like, so I'm going to start a business. I'll start working 4 hours a week. It doesn't work like that. So like, I'm like, right now I'm trying to launch this podcast. I'm working like 24/7. And
yeah.
And people are like, oh, like, but like you get to travel and do all that stuff. Yeah, I do that stuff like once I've done the work to set up like the 4-hour work week. And a lot of people are trying to do like build a 4-hour work week with a 4-hour work week, and it doesn't work like that. So if you actually just look at somebody successful, do exactly what they've done. So for example, like podcasters, I've been picking the brains of people who've launched successful podcasts. And so I'm not going into it saying like, like I'll just randomly throw up a podcast and like hope for the best. But that's what most people do. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, oh, I don't know why it didn't work. Like I think my stuff's pretty good. Like, but they didn't do any of that initial upfront work, and or they didn't execute by like working like crazy on everything that they learned. So once you put in crazy amount of work, what'll happen is you usually get the results you would expect to get, and then that 80-hour work week will set up a 4-hour work week on whatever you produced and created.
Yeah, man, I think that's something that people don't get, is that, man, everything, when you become an expert at anything, it transitions into all things. So it's like, I'll interview guys on like health and fitness, and they're saying the same things that you're saying. It comes down to simple, basic actions, and you have to be able to put in the work. Like it's kind of cool. You actually have a Facebook group that I'm a part of. I need to take my pictures for it, of the get ripped or get embarrassed. But no, man, that's great. That's awesome. It's such a cool interactive thing for people to do. And it's like, whenever I talk to a fitness expert, it's just like, oh, well, if you get your body working in the right mode, then it's easy to stay in shape. But getting there is the tough thing. Same thing goes for business. Same thing goes for dating. Same thing goes for changing your mentality and working on general happiness. Is that you've got to be able to work at something, and you've got to. And the only way that I think to do that is to do what you love to do what you're good at. And it generally comes down to self-expression. In whatever field that you're in, as long as you can do what you really like. I mean, shit, man, you have a blog about how to remain jobless, how to stay an entrepreneur, how to be successful in those ways, how to think in those ways. And I've seen you put in a tremendous amount of work and research into each blog post so that quality is first. And then after that, marketing comes into play. And it's very cool because it's sadly opposite to how most people think. And it's really sad, man. I think we've been sold as a culture this idea that, you can easily do things without investing something you're passionate about. And in a indirect way, it teaches you not to value what you're passionate about. It teaches you not to value your ambitions and value the stuff which gives you self-worth. And in fact, which will make your relationships better, which will make you make it easier to make a commitment to whatever it is, whether that's success or meditation or running or fitness or whatever stuff. But man, when you have a relationship with yourself, it's so much easier, in a good relationship with yourself, not some love-hate thing. It's so much easier to make a change and make a difference for the better. I want to ask you this because there's some transitions happening with stuff that I want to do, and it has to do with blogging and your mentality going into a successful blog. I know you kind of covered a lot of this stuff, but what is like the bare bones recipe that you would need to have a successful blog or internet presence?
So for me, when I'm writing a post, it's going to sound kind of weird, but like I want whatever article I'm writing about, usually I've got a number of, some of my posts are more like, here's something going on with a company I'm investing in. So that's like kind of different, but I want to take a concept, same type of concept, but the majority of my posts that I write, I want to take the idea that I'm writing about and have that be the definitive article for the subject. So in other words, if you ask someone, how do I kind of calculate my numbers or, risk on a business? Like I want everyone to be thinking about like EV millionaires math on Forever Jobless. Like that's the article you have to read. And the same thing with like, if you read my diversification post, entrepreneurial diversification, it's like, hey, should I start, a lot of people when they start out, should I start these couple ideas? Should I start one idea? And I've got like 3,000 or 4,000 or however many words on not only the why I think you should start just one business, but about like 3, 4, 5 rebuttals as to what everyone is going to say and the rebuttal of like why they're wrong. And so it's like, I don't need to write, 7 more blog posts on the same subject. So what happens is, if I wrote, one idea of like, hey, I think you should start a business, one business because, if you start, 5 businesses at a time, your time's going to be divided into, 20% on each business, yada, yada. And like I wrote 500 words on that. And then I sent that post out. Yeah, it's maybe a good tip for someone who didn't know that, but someone who needs to know like what they should do on that, that's not the definitive article. So these other 47 articles, you're going to maybe need to read those too. And so I'd rather write one article where it's like, I have the answer. Like you don't need to read anybody else's stuff. Like I want whatever I'm writing on, reading anybody else's stuff is going to be a waste of your time. Like that's my goal. I'm not saying that's, I believe that's the case with stuff I put out is like, if you read that and if you read that and want to know the answer, you don't have to read anything else. Like I'm giving you the answer. That's my goal with what I write about. That's why I'm not talking about stuff I don't know about. You won't see me, blogging about, how to not procrastinate because I have no idea. I'm the worst procrastinator. If I'm blogging about how to not procrastinate, I'm telling you like how I'm horrible at it. These are the things I'm trying. This is what's working. So that wouldn't be like a definitive, here's how you do it type post. I try to blog about things that I either know or am doing in a unique way that someone hasn't talked about. Because my whole theory is that if someone's written on this in the same way I'm writing about it, why would I ever write a post on it? I would just link to that person. And the way most people do blogs is they take the same exact ideas, the same ways, and then they put it out, and it doesn't make any sense. And so you mentioned this. You brought up a point where you mentioned a lot of people are not using their own thoughts, and they're basically just putting out the same content. So it's funny. I actually wrote a post on this on the forum the other day. How even thought leaders, a lot of thought leaders, they're not actually the thought leader. They're taking ideas that are already out there, and they're the best marketers on certain ideas and concepts. And there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people who write good books, they're not the person that came up with the idea, but they're the person who like gets known as the guy who did that, even though like they're not actually the guy. They're the guy who like put it in a book and market it, packaged it up and marketed it and sold it. But there are very few people with original thoughts, and or at least taking, an idea and looking at it in a different way, and so people can learn from it.
Sure.
So I think I'm kind of rambling about it, but the quickest, the shortest way I would do it if I was to launch a blog post is I would want every single article that I write to be viewed as like a definitive post. Like you could have your answer with this article. So for you, it might be like, what's a main subject that you talk about? Like
there's the whole point, and this will transition to a few other things that I want to ask you, is that TSL and what that is, absolutely becoming is like total self-improvement. How can I have a better mentality? How can I have better communications? How can I have better relationships? How can I have, better health and fitness? So the total expression of self, I mean, the age-old question is, how do I get a 10? How do I get a chick that's super hot, right? Or even if there's a female, she might be asking something like that. How do I get the best quality guy? And in order to do that, man, the answer is easy. Is make your life the best it can possibly be. And when you can express that, you're set. And man, there's like some crazy action happening on my Skype.
I see it.
It's like nuts, dude. My face is split in half. So where should I sit? But anyway, but basically, like what I want to look at is like sex is the root of a lot of things. It's how all things connect. It's how things transition and transform. And it goes that we have like a whole philosophy and all this sort of stuff. And so everything revolves around that. If you're going to be an absolute expression of yourself and combine with something else, how do you express the best part of you? How do you get to the best part of you? So it all revolves around that. How can we be the best expression of who we are? And go ahead.
So not to interrupt you. So I would take, like you said, one idea that like would be a blog, like it's a sub niche of the subjects you talk about. So for example, like how do I get a 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I were writing that article, you would basically write it. You would want to hit every single rebuttal somebody would have. So if I was some guy and I was like, I don't know if I could get a 10 or something, I would say like, Steve, hey, but like, let's say like somebody's a 5, right? I'm a 5. So what do I do to get, I can't get a 10. So, maybe part of your article is on, confidence, right? Because that's only like 1/10 of the article at most, right? You need to be able to think you can get a 10.
It would be a long article. Keeping it under 4,000 words would be.
So that's like a huge article. But the thing is, most other people who write that article is never going to be the definitive guide.
Yeah.
So basically what's going to happen is if you can cover every point, confidence to, for one thing, maybe you want to like work out. And here's, maybe you have another article that shows like, workout stuff. So basically like cover everything. Like if you do these like 10 things and each 10 thing is like super in depth, like not only will you become the person that can attract a 10, but you'll know, you'll be confident how to get them. You'll know how to do it. You'll know where to find, okay, like now that I know all this stuff, where do I find them? Like where do these 10s hang out? So you would have one article.
Where's
right?
the secret layer of the 10?
I know, right?
Yeah.
So now this guy who was a 5 is like, hey, Steve, like how, now that I know all this stuff, where do I find them? And so that's also in the article. And so it's not like 14 different articles that you put out over 6 months. It's one definitive article. And then what happens is basically your goal is to treat that post like it's like a business. So it sounds goofy, but so for all my posts, I really think every post is going to go viral when I launch it. And it sounds stupid, and they never do, right? Like there's a couple that have gone viral, but Millionaire's Math went, huge on Reddit. I was getting, at least for an entrepreneur post, and those, but I feel like every one of them is going to go viral. So you need to treat that post like, okay, I need to get it in all the places where I have a chance to get lucky with it, right? And then you want to promote it by telling other people, hey, look, I put this out. I think it's really high value. Will you share it? Now, that's a lot harder these days because of the fact that kind of everyone does that now. Like now when I get those emails, it's like, okay, another one. It's like but if you can think of something unique,
you built relationships with a lot of people with true with really enjoying their stuff. You really studied people. And so when you actually reached out to somebody, it wasn't like, hey, let me use you, for some free publicity. There was like, they knew that they had communicated with you and that you were really into it.
And you can set up stuff. So I strategically will do some stuff around certain posts. For example, like I'm launching the podcast, and doing guest posts and interviews around the podcast, but also like there'll be a post, like the post, you already know about it, the stuff I'm doing with investing, advising, but nobody on Forever Jobless does at this point, really. So I'm going to, at some point, while stuff's really popular, put that post out because I want people to see it. And so you can strategically take something you want a lot of people to see. So let's say you write that how to get a 10, and it's like the most definitive article of all time on like, if you wanted to do Dream Girl, this is how you do it. So basically, if I were you, I'd be I'd be interviewing, guest posting right around that same time. And I'd also be like figuring out maybe some sort of, unique viral marketing around that subject that nobody else in the space is doing. I don't know that's who's doing what type of marketing in that space, but, those are the things I'd be looking at. So you're already guaranteed to get a certain amount of traffic. So if the value is there, what happens is then it compounds. So the way most people do it is they put low value things out there and then they don't market them very much. Or they'll like tweet them and Facebook at them out. And they'll be like, I don't understand why it didn't go viral. So but if you put all your time into the value and then just guarantee yourself that some traffic is going to be there, what happens if it is actually really, really valuable, it's going to compound very strong. So most of my traffic that I get to the site is direct and referral. So basically it's like people searching for Forever Jobless and people coming from, somebody else that linked to me and shared my post or I had a guest post on their site, whatever it may be. And most people, they're getting organic traffic and, they're getting wherever else, mostly organic traffic. I don't blog enough to get a lot of organic traffic and I don't spend any time on SEO. But so I have to do that stuff. And I think you could do that stuff and do really well.
Man, there's a guy who I'm going to be interviewing who also lives in Austin. He's actually a former client of mine, but he's Dr. Nerdlove. And the guy posts like 2,000 to 4,000 word articles 3 times a week. It's crazy. Wow. But I mean, he like mad amounts of traffic. I'm going to stop and start my camera really quick because I don't know what the fuck is going on. But
there we go.
Yeah. Okay. At the top. It's still at the top.
Oh, but, yeah. It moved down during the interview.
Yeah, man. What the fuck?
You just got to keep shrinking.
Anyway, but the thing is that actually there's 2 things that I want to ask you from that. Can you give a specific example of where you did that in Forever Jobless? And then I really actually want to talk to you about the whole idea of Forever Jobless, including the podcast.
So are you asking for the idea on how to?
Yeah. What would be like a specific way of like, how you talk to people and how you were able to get an orchestration of people talking about it and sharing it in the right sort of way?
Sure. So when I initially launched Forever Jobless, I did one guest post on Viper Chill, and Viper Chill is like a really popular blog. At the time, I think maybe it had 20,000 subscribers. It's bigger now, but at the time it had roughly 20,000 subscribers, and they were all kind of in the same space as I was. And so I did a post like the same week I launched on Viper Chill, and I think it was within days. And so I got a lot of initial traction. What happened was the content I was putting out was relatively high value content. Like I spent a lot of time on it. And so those people would see it and share it. And, if I had been putting out, 500-word articles, I would have still got all that traffic, but it would have never compounded. They would have never shared it. And so, so that's an example. An example I'm doing with right now for the podcast is, I'm mentioning to people like you, hey, like, I'm doing a couple of interviews, and a lot of the reason I don't interview all the time is just because, if I don't have anything going on, it's traffic at a time where it's not going to benefit me, and or I'm busy or whatever it may be. But like, I do very time targeted traffic to where I want it all to happen around a certain point where I'm doing something. So I want whatever I'm doing to compound. So for example, the podcast, if I do like 10 to 15 interviews and they all come out like the same week around when I launch the podcast, well, you remember what we talked about with the podcast and the downloads and, how I can potentially do better. So what's going to happen is, I'll be one of the top new and noteworthy guys because everybody's talking about my stuff at the same time, and that'll affect new and noteworthy. And same concept, right? If I'm putting out super high quality podcast, that's going to compound it. And if I was putting out low quality podcast, it wouldn't matter. Like I would just drop off and die once I was off of new and noteworthy. So I'm basically using the marketing to compound itself, using high value to continue compounding, and then basically it just keeps compounding if you're putting high value stuff. It doesn't compound at all if you're not. So once I drop off, a lot of people. So new and noteworthy is 8 weeks. So you have 8 weeks to be in new and noteworthy for iTunes. So after 8 weeks, what happens to a lot of people is they're like, going up, like, and then like they get off new and noteworthy and they die off because like they were getting marketing, they were getting the traffic there because of new and noteworthy, but they didn't have high enough quality content. And so because of the fact that my focus is on the value, well, what's going to happen is I'll get all that traction, but then I'll either stay where I was or it'll keep compounding because of the value, and so I'll keep growing, even though I'm not new and noteworthy.
Yeah. No, man, it's cool stuff. Very, very good information. And what's so crazy is there's so much more information that you have about so many different things. I wanted to ask you about Forever Jobless because it's like, why do you do it? You don't need to do it. It's kind of like a passion project of yours. It's become so successful in the sense that it's become popular, man. You've been able to share information and share your ideas. Now you're going to do a podcast that I'm assuming it revolves around Forever Jobless.
Yep.
What is your goal with all this? Like, why are you doing it? It's not something that's making you a lot of money. It's
me zero.
Yeah, it's a business that has a completely different purpose.
Yeah. So, up to this point, I haven't attempted to monetize at all. Initially, I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. So, I started it 2012. I was like, I don't know exactly what I want to do with this, but I really like talking about this stuff. I like helping with people with business. And so my main goals were, number one, build a better network. At that point, I rarely went to events. Didn't know a lot of people. So at that point, I started going to tons of events and started blogging. And since then, like, my network's grown by 10. Like, I know a lot of people now. So networking was one, and I've pretty much done what I wanted to do with that. I mean, obviously I want to network more and meet more people, but that's worked for that purpose. And number two is to help people and educate people. I've done that, but not on the level that I want to do yet. Podcasting will help that, but on the selfish side, at some point I'll monetize it. I haven't monetized. Part of the reason I haven't monetized it, all my friends are like, dude, you're stupid. You could be making good money already from it. Part of the reason I haven't monetized it is I didn't want to go in and start a make money blog to make money with it. Like, I thought that's the whole flaw in the market. That like all these guys are talking about how to make money and they need to blog to make money. And I thought that was really, really flawed. And so I didn't want to come out selling all these products and all that. And I thought that's like a cheap and sleazy way to do, to launch a blog. Is just, I want to sell you tons of things. That's why I'm talking about this. So, that's the only reason I haven't monetized up till now. And now I'm feeling kind of like, yeah, maybe my friends are right. Maybe I should be monetizing and getting paid for doing all this stuff. But with the podcast, hopefully I'll be able to build a much bigger platform and either decide to monetize through some sort of business off Forever Jobless. And then I would like to write a book at some point, which I'll need an audience for. So it will help a lot with that. I think in 2015, I'd like to do a book. And I think the other thing that we talked about a little bit is if I don't monetize by selling a product or starting some service off Forever Jobless, I'm starting to invest and advise in businesses. And I was thinking, man, like it'd be cool. And I'm already doing this a little bit. I have 2 deals I'm working with right now and looking at a couple other ones. It would be really cool if instead of me taking money to teach people business, if I gave them money to help them with their business more and basically like partnered with them. So basically the couple deals I'm doing right now is, I give them a certain amount of capital and, help them, give them advice, and I end up partnering with their businesses. And I think it's, I don't know if you want to get into this now, but like the reason I'm doing these type of deals is, those businesses can grow very fast and they actually need money more than a lot of people who are out raising money. Mathematically, a lot of times those businesses can get you a higher return because of the fact that I guess the easiest way to describe it, number one, there's nobody doing it. There's nobody investing in these like small, tiny niche, uninvestable deals. But a lot of times they're so easy, like it's very simple deals. But because they're so small, like, for example, you're not going to get like a big angel or venture company to look at this, site making, $3,000 a month. It could be making $20,000 a month. It's too tiny. They need to like deploy like, $10 million in funds. They're not going to go get like 10,000 of these little tiny deals. So, so that's something I'm doing. And so I may turn Forever Jobless into this, this super micro incubator. I mean, that's one idea I have for it. I don't know if I'll go that route 100%, but already doing a couple of those deals, and the math on it is insane. And a lot of people need help, and people that, are just starting out, they don't have, $5,000-$10,000 to buy these big seminars and coaching courses. They're the people that actually need money to start their stuff up and grow it faster. So taking money from those people to teach them, well, it's probably good value for them. Also stunts the growth of their business because they need that capital for growth. So it's kind of this weird, flawed model that's going on. Like, hey, I'm a 20-year-old kid. I got this good business. It's starting to make some money. My net worth is $5,000. Let me give you that $5,000 to show me how to grow the business. It's like, you need that $5,000 for the business. So, works the opposite way, where I'd rather take $20,000 of my money and put it into the business, help them grow it way faster, and take a piece of it for helping them do it.
Yeah, man, that would be pretty insane. You would actually, and I've thought about an idea like this before because there's 2 things to it. I mean, the money is one part, but really what's necessary is working with somebody who knows what they're doing. If you work with somebody that is crazy, and basically you're paying for it with the investment of your business. But because, man, you go through so many mistakes when you have a business and you're trying out something new. You're trying out partnering up with people. You're trying out, getting investors, working with investors, marketing, whatever the hell it is. Nobody's teaching you these things. And when you mess up, which there's a lot of reasons to mess up and a lot of ways you can mess up in there, man, it becomes catastrophic. It's something which you learn the hard way. And, man, that would be such an amazing thing, like to have somebody with experience that was involved that could help you prevent making all those like terrible, tragic mistakes in business. Man, that's really cool. That's a great idea, and it's actually a great way for you to take $20,000, and especially if it's a successful business, you could make bank. You could make a lot, And
that's the thing. A lot of these small businesses, they may stay a small business unless they get, advice and or capital. And so it's like, and I tell, people that I'm looking into deals with is like, look, because a lot of people are like, they're taught the idea that, it's different. Some people are taught different things. Some people are taught just go raise money, which I don't think is necessarily right. Then another side of the people are told, make sure you keep 100% no matter what, which is also not 100% right. I think the whole thing is what can help you build the best business. And for the entrepreneur, it's like, what can make you the most money, right? So if you have a company, let's say you have a company that makes, $3,000 a month, right? And you're going to like slowly, piddle along and maybe grow it to, 5, 6, 7 grand a month, whatever it may be. And maybe it'll take you a couple of years to really grow it. Where, if someone could come in and say, hey, I know how to tweak some things to grow it a lot faster. Also, here's some capital to help do that. And, instead of waiting, you basically fast forward a couple of years, instead of just trying to figure it all out yourself, like slowly, like raising the money, like saving a little bit each month to put back in the business, where you can kind of skip that point to where if instead, a year later you could make $20,000 a month with that business and you gave up, a chunk of that business, you're making more even though you don't own 100%. Where a lot of people have this idea that like, I heard from a book that you should keep as much equity, which is 100% true. But a lot of the times they're not thinking about like, what if anytime I needed an answer, I could get it. And also I had a bunch of money to help scale the business quicker. So like what I tell people when I go in is like, look, you shouldn't do this deal unless you think you can make more money with this deal. Like it should be a win-win. It shouldn't be like a win-loss. So a lot of people go into business trying to like negotiate down the hardest deal and the best deal. And then somebody's going to have buyer's remorse later. So really the goal is basically they should make way more money doing a deal if they're getting any sort of investment from anybody. And vice versa, like on the investment side, if I'm looking at a deal, any deal I'm looking into, I need to be able to do better on that deal than I can do somewhere else, or it doesn't make sense. And I think a lot of people are thinking in a very tiny box, and part of the reason is that there's nobody doing these type of deals. I mean, there's literally, no one's going around looking for like $2,000 a month profit businesses, being like, that seems like a great deal, but part of it is just because that's the space I've played in for so long is like the small niche businesses online, where it's like, all the sharks usually go up and play in the, hey, let's go raise, millions of dollars and let's go start these big businesses. And for whatever reason, I did the same thing with, poker. I stayed in the smaller games, just played a lot of games, and you could make similar money because there was less competition. And, I'm finding kind of like the same thing. It's like, just crunching the numbers. It's wow. Like I actually think there's a really big business opportunity since there's nobody doing it.
So this is total side note. So in poker, you were not big on the high stakes, huh?
No. So basically, I was playing anywhere from 1-2 to 2-4, which for people listening, that's like when you only buy in for like $200 to $400 per table. And then I would play like 8 to 12 tables or whatever at a time. So you'd multiply your hourly rate by whatever you could do. But so if I was going to move up and play higher stakes where I'd buy in for several $1,000s, it's much harder competition. So I would have to play less tables. I'd make less per table. And so I actually, over time potentially you could make more. But what I did was just eat up the smaller games money, and like at least in the relatively short to midterm, I made more money doing that than I could have by playing the higher stakes.
Right.
And just because everyone else was like, let's move up, make higher money.
Sure.
And a lot of guys who were successful did. They ended up killing it. Where same thing in this situation. If I went and was like, I'm just going to attempting to start like $50 million companies, I'm either never going to make any money with it, or I'll hit a home run and do one. But with this, it's like you basically. And again, it's not right for everybody. It just seems to be right for me, is if I can just constantly hit singles and doubles over and over and over and over with no competition, it adds up to where, if I was starting a larger company, I'd end up making pretty good money in either situation.
Now, when it comes down to business and entrepreneurship, because there's a lot of people who make mistakes, what's the difference between the successful entrepreneur's mind and the unsuccessful?
So, I mean, a lot of people just don't have the fundamentals down. I think, like I always talk about with you, there's only two things, same as like the blog post I think we talked about, but there's only two things you need to know to start a business. Like one, can you offer a better service or product than anybody else does in the market. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the best ever, but it has to fill a need that isn't there right now. So can you do that? And if not, then go back to the drawing board until you can. Two is, can you get in front of your audience? And basically, lots of times people either have zero of those solved. There's only two steps, zero of the two done, or they have one of them done. So if you have zero of them, obviously you're going to flop. But if you have one of them, if you have like a great product, but you have no idea how to market it, nobody ever hears of it, it's not going to work. Like you need to know the marketing end of it. You need to be able to get in front of the audience. Or two, if you don't have a good product, you can be the best marketer in the world, and maybe you'll get some traction early on. It's like the standard affiliate marketer launch. Bunch of sales, drops off, dies. They have to start another one because of the fact that their product isn't good enough. And so, I think if people can just get those two steps down, right? So one, do you have a better product or service than anybody else? If you do, go to step two. Step two is, can you get in front of the audience? If you can't, hey, reach out to somebody else who's a marketer, partner with them, do some sort of joint venture with them, figure out a way to get in front of the audience. It is really not more complicated than that. A lot of people are like, hey, I need to learn SEO and do all this stuff. That's one form of marketing. There's a million forms of marketing. You just need one that can reach the audience. And if you don't know it, hire somebody who does, or partner with somebody who does. And a lot of people are looking at all the wrong things. They think, I need a sexy web design. I need all this stuff. They're looking at like 47 different things for their business when they just need to be looking at these two things, and then they would solve it.
And I know you got to get out of here, but one question that actually got written into me, it says, can you ask Bill what he thinks the future of e-commerce online stores is, and what does Bill think is the best for passive income?
Best. I don't know what the best is. I mean, there's a million different ways you can make it. It all depends on what you want to do. So in terms of the second answer, that at least for me recently, I've tried to do more things that I just like doing, and I'm kind of letting the money figure itself out, which is not necessarily the route I'd choose to go. If I was just starting out, I wouldn't do that. But I think it's easier to make money if you really enjoy it. So I've tried to start a lot of stuff, and I didn't necessarily enjoy it that much, and I was just starting it to make money with it. And so I think a big thing is you should at least like what you're doing. And the passive income, again, we talked about it. If you work hard enough on the front end, you solve the two steps, and you learn how to automate your business, you can set up passive streams pretty easy. So there's no best thing. I mean, there's blogs, there's podcasts, I guess podcasts and blogs aren't necessarily 100% passive because you still got to actually produce the content. But there's e-commerce stores, there's a lot of passive income sources. I wouldn't say there's any best one, but the first question, what's the future of e-commerce? So, I obviously don't know. A lot of people will think what's going to happen with Amazon getting bigger and bigger. I don't know how much harder it's going to be for small stores to rank, and how many more people are going to go to small stores as opposed to Amazon. What I do think is, as I did drop shipping when I did e-commerce. Mm-hmm. If I could do it over, I would not do drop shipping. And part of the reason, obviously the whole reason would be you don't control anything. Your traffic, with drop shipping, you can't control your traffic because you don't have a big enough margins to buy your traffic. You're selling the same thing as everybody else. It goes against all my philosophy. So I wouldn't do that again. And another reason too is people are like, oh, the Amazon, the giant, I can't compete with them. Well, I think a lot of people are looking at it the wrong way. If you have a drop ship store and you're on and you're looking at Amazon, Amazon's a beast and you're not going to beat them. But I think if you're creating a brand, which is what I would do, I would either source from China source from wherever, create a product, create your own brand, get bigger margins, be able to buy the traffic, put it on Amazon. If you own the product, Amazon is a marketing source for you. So a lot of people look at it as you're competing against Amazon, but I know plenty of people who are creating their own brands, putting it on Amazon, and Amazon's like their biggest marketing channel. They're actually fulfilling it for them. Like they're in business with Amazon. So I think the future of e-commerce is creating a brand that's, like we talked about, that's better than what's out there, and figure out the marketing. And right now, Amazon's an unbelievable marketing channel. So you don't have to game it, but you can game Amazon the same way people gamed SEO a couple years ago. And if you have a valuable product, same way we talked about, you're going to stay ranked. It's not some, just random links that are going to rank you. If you have a valuable product, basically people vote in terms of buying and rating it. So you'll stay ranked very high. It'll continue to act as a good marketing channel for you. But I would say, create a brand. And if people, a lot of people say, I don't have the money to create a brand. One of the ways you can get around that, if you don't want to drop ship and you don't want to start your own brand, is you can white label. So what white labeling is basically taking somebody else who already has a brand and say, look, I want to work out a deal with you. Instead of creating my own brand, why don't I cut you in and, let's say we're selling, heaters, right? And we've got Steve's heaters, and I say, Steve, I don't want to go to China and make my own heater. Can you white label your heaters to me? And what would happen is all you would do is, like, instead of branding it with Steve's heaters, we'd have Billy's heaters, and Steve would get a piece of every one of them, but I'd get a much higher margin now. So instead of getting 25%, I would have got on drop shipping. Steve was getting 60, and so I'm getting 45 now, and I give Steve 15 for letting me white label his products. And then it's the same deal as drop shipping, except the fact that I just set up a white label deal, and so I make a little more in it. Like, it costs me a little money. I got to create a logo, do pictures and that type of stuff, but less money than going to China or wherever else and creating your own brand.
Man, and it's been awesome. Great information as always. I hate to rush this question, but you talked about doing what you love. What do you love to do, and what do you live for?
I mean, I really love, like, the stuff I talk about on Forever Jobless, really just helping entrepreneurs understand how to make money. I would do it for free, which I have been.
Well, you have been, yeah.
For a long time. And, I'm still on internet forums answering questions. I just really enjoy answering questions. And that's part of the reason I've jumped into, like, advising companies I'm investing in, because, man, I like it. Like, I would, I get a call from, one of the guys I'm invested in, they have a question, they want to figure something out. Man, that's like my high, is like figuring out a strategy to, like, solve their problem. I just enjoy teaching people how to make money, figure out, strategy around business. And I think, if I made, $20 million, right, never had to work again, I think I'd probably be doing something related to Forever Jobless blog and Forever Jobless podcast just for fun, and investing and advising in these projects for fun. So I'm kind of, I've talked a lot. Neville. You probably know Neville pretty well. I talked to Neville a lot about this, and we both talk about how we're kind of at this, like, comfortable success level, right? Where we've been successful, but not to the point where we're not rich. So it's like, well, we're kind of at this point where, we don't have the hunger to work on some new project just to make money on it. It's not, because we don't need to do it. Like, doing so will not change our life in any way. However, we don't want to just not, we want to start projects, we want to do stuff. So our focus is shifting towards the things we want to do. So, for Neville, that's like copywriting and teaching people that stuff. For me, it's like, I really feel like I have it figured out, a lot of the fundamentals, and able to translate that to other people to where they could take the fundamentals and incorporate them into their business and be successful, where that really excites me when I can help someone and they come back and tell me a couple months later, man, like, I tried that stuff you taught me, and, I'm killing it now. And, like, that's awesome to me. That's like my high. So I really like doing that stuff.
Man, awesome stuff. It's past your bedtime. As we can see, it's still daylight out there. But I know you said you had to go, and you had to go at the top of the
playoff basketball tonight. Basketball.
Hey, man, I don't have anything to do with that.
Yeah, we got a game downtown at the Y here.
Cool. All right, man. Well, take it easy. This will be up and for everybody to see, and I can't wait to see what happens with the Forever Jobless podcast, because You always do good stuff, man. I got my money on you, so
pressure's on now.
Yeah,
huh?
yeah, totally right. All right, man. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me on, man.